Hey everybody, I'm Lisa Brennan.
And I'm Justin Trice. Welcome to Crime of the Arts.
A true crime podcast that peeks behind the curtain to shine a light on the dark and untold truths of the creative arts.
From film set mysteries to celebrity murders and art heists, these two theater nerds will usher you into the unknown.
This week, I'm going to talk about a murder on Music Row.
And I'll tell you about WWE's Unmentionable.
I had texted my cousin and I was like, hey, you inadvertently got a shout out in my new podcast about Michael Rosenbaum and blah, blah, blah. So I sent it to her and she listened to it and she's like, I actually met her. And she was so skinny that it was like she was a twig. And it must have been
after everything. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to hop out of New York because every story I've done so far has pretty much taken place in New York.
Yeah, take a trip out of New York.
Yeah, but I'm not going, I'm just going to Nashville. So I still haven't left places I live. And my sources are an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, Season 2, Episode 14, named Unexplained Death. And I used a few articles from the Tenneseean, which is a pretty prominent local newspaper, and abcnews.com. So we're going to stay in my new hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. It's funny because my New York comes out when I talk about going to Nashville because I end up just calling it the city. And I'll say like, Mike and I went into the city for dinner. And apparently that's very wrong by Southern standards. It's not Manhattan.
Oh, no.
So yeah, they all look at me like, what city are you talking about?
What's the city?
They're like, Nashville's not a city. I'm like, it's almost there.
It's almost there.
But the correct term is Nashville. Nashville. Or downtown. Okay, so when in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? So Nashville is the country music capital of the world. Musicians from all over the U.S. come to Nashville to find their big break. And if you drive down Broadway right now, you'll hear different musicians every few feet, and they're all amazing and super talented. Have you been to Broadway yet?
For Nashville? Yeah. No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I see pictures though. It looks really cool. Dude, and I'm like, I have to get down there. You guys have your little main street. It's not even just Broadway. You have a whole strip of just
it's almost always as crowded as Times Square. Like it's like mulling around groups of people. It's definitely a vibe and an experience that I have never seen anywhere else. In 2020, the population was just over 1.2 million people, and the city is growing faster than it can manage, to be honest. In 1989, which is when our story takes place, it was very, very different. There was less than 500,000 people living here. And boy, did they tell you about it. And I get it. If you were a local, 20 years ago and all these freaking people started coming in and making everything congested and busy, could be a different change of life.
Opening up the freeway, right. Crowding our stores, city.
For real.
I mean, downtown.
Even the highway, I live right off of the highway over here, and they're expanding it to like 4 lanes on either side. It's going to be like a super highway because the infrastructure is just not built already for what's here. In 20 something years, the population's more than doubled. That's an intense number.
That's a great boom. Like, I don't even know if downtown was able to handle that capacity.
Right. And the housing market is they're building complexes, and they call these houses tall and skinnies, where they're like 3 or 4 floors high, and they're reminiscent of railroad houses in the city in New York.
Oh my goodness.
Where you have all the railroad rooms where you got to walk through one room to get to the other.
You got to walk through the room to get to the next bedroom, to get to the bathroom.
Right. So tall and skinnies, they're taking up less ground, but they're still going high. Music Row is located southwest of downtown and is home to record label offices, radio stations, and recording studios, and is considered the heart of the country music industry. So the first person I want to introduce is named Kevin Hughes. He was born in 1966 in Illinois. And as a child, Kevin was obsessed with country and Western music and the Billboard Top 100 charts. After high school, he attended Belmont University, which is here in Nashville. And he majored in music management and later switched to marketing. And in 1986, he was offered the internship of his dreams. He was going to be working at Cashbox Magazine, which was a weekly music industry trade magazine, and it published weekly for over 50 years. Have you ever heard of Cashbox Magazine?
I have not, but
I had not either.
Just the way you described that, that's the hell of a internship.
Yeah. And it's paid internship, not an internship where you're just not volunteering your time.
They're not just using him for labor. He's actually getting experience and exposure out of it, especially if it's ran for that long.
Right. So at 23, Kevin's dreams of breaking into the business side of the music industry were becoming a reality. And after a year of his internship, he became the chart director, where he managed the independent music charts, which tracked how often up-and-coming artists' songs were played on the radio all across the country. It was very time-consuming work to analyze those radio playlist reports, but he didn't mind the long hours, and it was his dream job. And Kevin had built a reputation for being one of the best chart directors Nashville had seen in years. When he moved to Tennessee, Kevin made a new friend named Sammy Sadler. I don't know how, because I can't make a friend for my life here.
Oh, really? Times were different back then. There was less people. They had to be friends.
The pandemic hasn't helped me, but he was a 21-year-old aspiring country star, and Sammy was on top of the world. He moved to Tennessee from Texas to find his own limelight, and he had a beautiful wife, a record deal, and was a promoter at Evergreen Records. Sammy had songs that made it on the very charts Kevin managed. And he was just waiting for his big break. It's amazing because they're both so young and they're so close to grasping parts of their dreams.
They're very close to grasping the start. Pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. Even from back then, I mean, the drive and stuff that you needed to get to there. The drive as a 23-year-old.
What were we doing when we were 23? Not this. Not moving across the country just yet, at least. The lives of these two young men would change forever on the night of March 9th, 1989. Kevin was working late at the Cashbox office, and Sammy met him there. They decided to get some food around 10:30 that night, and they went to grab some Captain D's. Have you ever had Captain D's?
Captain D's, I have. That is like fast food, seafood city right there. I mean, I don't know.
Gross. It's gross.
It's like the Applebee's of seafood, right. People.
But worse, you could drive through with your car and get it.
But worse. Yeah.
Don't do that. So after eating, they stopped at Sammy's office at Evergreen Records. Sammy wanted to use the phone in his office so that he could call his parents, which seems really strange to me.
At that time of night.
Right. It's 10:30 at night. It's a Thursday. And it's not like you just popped in by yourself. You brought your friend with you. I don't know.
Yeah, that whole thing's just weird. I mean, if you're doing something like that, obviously you had something either very important to say, or maybe that didn't happen at all. I don't know. I'm sure you'll tell me.
I will. But I mean, when I read this, I was like, that seems really suspicious. It's an odd thing to do Thursday night, 10:30, call your mama from your job. Like, why not call from home? It's not like you're alone. You brought your friend. Kind of sus. While he was on the phone chatting with his parents, Sammy could hear the front door of the office jiggling like someone was trying to come in, but the glass doors were locked. And he looked at Kevin. So Kevin went out to see what was up. And when he came back, he told Sammy that there was a black man outside and that he was wearing a mask, but that the guy just walked away.
Okay.
I just need to mention here in the interview footage throughout the Unsolved Mysteries episode, it is like so 90s and everyone's got a Billy Ray Cyrus mullet.
Oh, yeah.
Like super spiky on top and like the wet ramen noodles in the back. And everyone had multicolored denim on. It was like Justin and Brittany.
Denim on denim.
Denim on denim, bro.
Canadian tuxedos, right? Canadian tuxedos.
It was just super 90s and it was a little cringy to watch, you know. And now the mullet's back. I don't know how, but it's here. It's here and it's staying. I digress. Sammy hangs up with his mom and then they head out. The two of them were a little creeped out by the encounter with the random guy at the door. But when they got outside, they shrugged it off. No one was out there. Or toxic masculinity, and you're not allowed to be afraid.
Right. Got to tough it out. We're downtown, boy.
Right. Their car was parked across the street. Kevin had driven that night, so he got in the driver's side of the car, and Sammy walked around the front of the car to get into the passenger side. And as he sits, he leans to close the car door, and a man appears out of the shadows with a gun, aims it at Sammy, and he shoots him. And Sammy instinctively puts his arms up to protect his face. And Kevin must have been like, what is happening? And he threw open his driver's door and he starts running down Music Row.
Wow.
So this masked gunman chases him past another parked car. And as he's running, he's shooting at Kevin, and he hits Kevin once, and Kevin falls face down in the street. The assailant walks up and shoots him twice in the back of the head and takes off. In the meantime, Sammy crawls his way out of the car, covered in blood, and he makes his way up to the door of one of the apartments nearby, and they call 911.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack right there. Yeah. First off, Kevin tried to take off running, was shot.
This man tracked him down. He went after him.
He went solely after him. And not only did you hit him once, you hit him about 3 times, and you made sure to do it twice in the head, executioner style.
Right.
This isn't just a random murder by any sort of means. No one's going to come up to you in the middle of the night and decide to specifically hunt you and put 2 to the back of your head. They clearly made sure that he was dead.
Right. You would think that they knew exactly who was who, right?
Exactly. Who was who and where they were going. Because how did you just pop up then as well?
Sammy Sadler survived the attack. He was shot in his right arm where the bullet severed a major artery, and it took many surgeries for it to be repaired. Kevin Hughes was shot a total of 3 times, once in the back, and the gunman wanted to make sure he didn't survive, twice in the back of the head at close range. He was 23 years old, and he died at the scene before the police could arrive. Metro Nashville police investigated this case, and they had no motive and no suspect, but lots and lots of theories. So one of the theories was a wrong place, wrong time robbery, a random act of violence. But this guy never said a word to either person.
Exactly.
Nothing was taken. I mean, evidence doesn't really play to that theory.
Not at all. It doesn't match up. Again, and this person chased him specifically down.
Right.
And shot him twice in the back of the head.
And was waiting outside of his car.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So another theory was it was an angry musician getting revenge on Kevin for not putting their song on the top 100 charts at Cashbox magazine. Or police questioned maybe Kevin had been mixed up in some kind of scheme, some nefarious business. Maybe he was taking money under the table to skew the numbers, but there was no evidence to support that theory either. And if this was a professional hit, why not wait until Kevin was alone? Why kill or risk leaving a second person as a witness?
Exactly.
And I mean, the work he's doing, you really wouldn't think he was important enough to assassinate.
I mean, he worked his internship. He basically just did regular things on the side. There's no indication that he was dealing with anything nefarious or anything at all. It's just, this was a simple guy who had ambition and happened to be working towards his goal. And we just gunned him down execution style, but left his friend alive. It's a lot to take in.
And if this was a real hitman, he's not a very good hitman. And I'll tell you why. The only evidence the homicide detectives had to go on was the murder weapon, which was a .38 caliber handgun. And not only did they have Sammy as a witness, but 5 other eyewitnesses came forward. See what I mean about not a very good hitman? And I feel like that's a lot of witnesses. 5 witnesses?
That's a
6?
whole lot of witnesses.
Jeez.
I mean,
what is there, a parade outside that you're just going to start shooting people?
Let me kill this person in front of everyone. Right. That, to me, that sounds like I'm making a bold statement. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, right. But here's the problem. None of them could give a good description of this killer. There was, however, something unique found at the scene. Police did find a black baseball cap next to Kevin's body, but it wasn't Kevin's. On the front of it, it had an image of an infantryman, like the military, and it read World War II veteran and proud of it. That was it.
Okay, so we just
we have a bunch of witnesses with no information, a hat, and a gun caliber type.
That just sounds so wonky to me. Are we now playing this game where it's like, I just want to get people off my trail, so I'm going to throw random things. Me personally, I'm going to go execute someone now. I'm going to leave a yo-yo or some crayons after I execute this person in front of 5 people. Like, that's what that sounds like to me. No one will ever think it's me. Got to throw them off my scent.
It was Justin in the kitchen with the spatula.
After he gunned him down, he pulls out his SeaWorld t-shirt and sets it on the ground.
Do you have any theories of your own?
I don't know. Right now, this just seems like a weird cover up. I don't know if someone's angry at him. I don't know if it's like an ex-woman. I don't know what's happening here. All I know is nothing is adding up.
Nothing
They
makes
specifically
sense.
went after that person. I feel that in my bones.
Okay.
That there's an ulterior motive, and I can't wait to hear it.
So this case was cold for 14 years.
I'm sorry. Did you say 14 years?
14 years, over a decade, almost a decade and a half.
How the hell is that possible? Even with 5 witnesses.
Six.
I'm sorry, 6 witnesses.
In 2002, there was finally a break in the case. Investigators began unraveling a scandal of bribery and manipulation.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
In early 1987, 2 promoters who worked at the magazine were named Chuck Dixon and Tony D'Antonio. I mean, you can't get more. You have to.
Tony D'Antonio.
You have to shake your hand when you say that name.
That's all I was envisioning as you were saying it. And I was doing it here. I was like, D'Antonio. I'm like bribery and D'Antonio. This is shaping up to be something.
Yeah, right. A little mafia-esque.
Just a little bit.
So these 2 guys started taking quote unquote promotional fees from managers. And they were bribing DJs at radio stations. So they would get managers of these up and coming musicians to give them $2,000. And they would take a portion of that $2,000 and bribe DJs to play the songs. So yeah, they were paying as much as $2,000 per song, which adjusted for inflation is like $5,000 for one song.
That's insane.
Per DJ.
You know, we always hear about pay to play in terms of even nowadays, unfortunately, with music and sometimes with acting, with classes or seminars or meet and greets, if you will. But I mean, for back then, A, that was unheard of. And B, talk about a hell of an extreme. We straight up used the mob to do that. We didn't do it ourselves. We used the mob. We used the Southern Mafia to do pay and play. Like, that's pretty wild. Okay.
And they're not necessarily, like a real mafia like we're talking, but this is its own enterprise that these 2 guys have created. They were using cash to bribe these DJs. They were paying car payments. They were giving them free trips to Nashville with dinner and drugs and girls. Okay. And in return, the DJs at these stations, which they referred to as their pocket stations, they would add the songs they told them to, playlist reports that were sent in. So these false documents were used to make the very charts that Kevin created. If a DJ didn't stay in Dixon's pocket, he would threaten to expose them for taking those bribes. With high rankings on the charts came high recognition and a better chance of these musicians being signed to a label. So the scheme went around and around for years.
Okay.
So here's what the police put together. Kevin noticed the inconsistencies in the charts that were being published, and he confronted D'Antonio and Dixon. And they tried to get him on board. They made him a cash offer, but he was a man of integrity, and he didn't want to get involved in their scam. And this is something that he genuinely cared about.
Exactly. He was a true artist. He wanted to pave his own way to hit that stardom, and he didn't want any shortcuts, and I'm sure he didn't condone the methods of that as well. Like, I respect that a lot.
Me too. It's easy in the face of money, especially when you're young and starting out in your career, to make some inappropriate choices. But he did not do that. Mm-hmm. The pair of them became concerned that Kevin was about to expose them or go to the cops or the press. D'Antonio was no longer employed at Cashbox at the time of Kevin's murder, because he was reportedly fired for sexually harassing a female employee. This guy's a real gem.
Clearly, Tony D is a creep.
For real. So Dixon is the one who called for the hit, and D'Antonio is the one who took action. So he went to a friend named Daniels to get a gun to take Hughes out. On the morning of March 9th, D'Antonio drove to his friend's house all the way in Georgia, which in the story, they said it was 2 to 3 hours. I literally just went to Georgia and it was more like 5. So I guess it depends where he lived.
It depends on where he lives,
in relation to Nashville. But he asked if he could buy his friend's handgun. He knew he was selling it, and he told him that he needed it for protection. Isn't that what they all say?
Mm-hmm.
So D'Antonio took a few practice shots in his friend's yard, and he stayed for dinner that night. And he said, hey, if your wife or anyone else asks, I was here until the 11 o'clock news, okay? And his friend was like, okay, sure.
That's oddly specific, but all right.
Isn't it? The 11 o'clock news. 10 p.m. that night, D'Antonio had already made his way back to Nashville and was waiting on Music Row, dressed in dark clothing with a mask, gloves, and a gun. And it wasn't mentioned, but I'd have to assume that he followed Kevin and Sammy from Cashbox to Evergreen Records.
I would think he had to. I mean, I feel like he had to have been on their tail for some time, and he was just waiting for an opportune moment to strike.
All the way through the drive-thru at Captain D's and everything.
Yeah. He's like, let him get his last meal at Captain D's.
What a horrible last meal, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, their night wasn't planned out, so it just happened to be that way. So what evidence came to light in 2002? That black ball cap, this blows my mind. The ball cap had a cat hair inside of it, and they were able to match that cat hair to D'Antonio's cat.
Wow. Okay.
Nuts, right? First of all, 14 years. How old is this poor cat that you're now somehow?
The cat must barely
the cat must still be alive.
Still, that's, yeah.
Poor baby. Also, the friend from Georgia came forward and told police that he had sold Tony the gun. The investigators were able to go back to his former house and pull ballistics from the area where the test shots were taken. Those bullets were compared to the ones from Kevin's autopsy, and they were a match. Shot from the same gun, and forensic science is so awesome.
Yes, it is. And I mean, even for back then, that was a hell of a start into forensics. Like, dude,
they went back 15 years later and found the bullet. It's amazing. In 2003, D'Antonio was charged with first-degree murder and intent to commit second-degree murder. He pled not guilty, but was convicted in September of 2003 and was given a life sentence. He was 56 years old when he went to prison, and he died in jail in 2014. So that means that this guy only served 10 years. And that makes me so mad.
It makes me mad too. I'm like, that's not enough time for what he has done at all.
No, and to think the life that he cut short, and he got to live out another 15 years of his life.
Exactly. You know? And he cut Kevin's out at the prime of his life.
Chuck Dixon died in 2001 of cancer, so he couldn't be prosecuted, obviously. But from some of the articles I read, they made him sound like this Southern mobster, kingpin promoter.
You got to have some sort of pull if there could be 6 eyewitnesses and this case stalled for 14 years. I mean, right. Downtown clearly feared him.
Exactly. He'd often given the get in line or you'll end up like Kevin.
Ugh.
People think one of the reasons this case stayed cold for 14 years is because people were afraid to talk for fear of Dixon's actions. I mean, if you look at the timeline, it wasn't until 2002 when this broke and he passed in 2001. So it was right after he died that all of this information came out. Sammy Sadler continued making music, but due to his injuries, he was never able to play the guitar again. And if you go on his website, he's kind of capitalized on this horrible experience, which feels really icky to me.
Oh, my goodness. Listen, it's tragic that he survived and his friend did not. And I'm sure you got to deal with a whole lifetime of PTSD and other things amongst that. And I completely get that, and I respect that. You probably need money for whatever, but to capitalize on your friend's death, I do not support that shit at all.
Wait until you hear how gross it is. He has the story as the headline of his website, and he has a song called 1989 that I did not listen to, sorry. And his bio read, and I quote, "The country singer survivor of the murder on Music Row with a brand new book called A Hit with a Bullet, and album 1989.
Wow. First off, I'm glad you didn't listen to it. For those listening to our podcast, do not go listen to that. Do not support the notion of that track. Do not support that. If Kevin was still alive, I don't think he'd be down for something like that. Don't support it.
I'm sure he doesn't appreciate that. The Hit with a Bullet is actually a double entendre because when Kevin was making the charts, he would put an asterisk on the songs that you should look out for that were up and coming. So they referred to it in the magazine as a bullet. So hit with a bullet. Yeah. Not a fan.
Not a fan. Two on the nose. Not a fan.
Kevin Wayne Hughes was laid to rest in White County Memorial Garden near his hometown of Carmi, Illinois. And Sammy Sadler is still out in Nashville somewhere playing his music.
I hope Sammy at some point in time can put all of this to rest and find the inspiration to make new music, not affiliated by his friend's death, though.
I mean, if you look at the timeline, he was in his 20s, in the early 90s.
Yeah.
He's much older now. I don't think he's going to all of a sudden
set in his ways now.
Claim to fame. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is the story of a murder on Music Row.
That was a hell of a story, Lisa. Again, it's really unfortunate. Kevin seems like he was just hitting his prime, his stride, and he was one step close to that stardom, and that was all kind of taken away from him. And
there was one thing that they talked about in one of the Tenneseean articles that I didn't include in here. He apparently, Kevin, called his brother the day before he was murdered and was like, "Hey man, I got a lot going on. Work's kind of crazy. I think I just got to come home for a little while, and when I come home, I'll tell you about what's going on." And then he was killed.
Oh my goodness. So
his family went 14 years.
14
and still
years.
To this day, I mean, you can assume that this is what he was going to tell them, that he was confronted by these two men. But
that is just heartbreaking, though. Again, to be the brother and you hear this phone call and you're already kind of panicking, like, well, what's going on, Kevin? Like, all right, I guess we could talk about it tomorrow. And tomorrow never comes. And then you waited 14 years just to get some sort of resolution. I can't imagine the anguish the brother is going through. I can't imagine if he was blaming himself, thinking if we just would have talked about it earlier, maybe I could have helped him. Like, that's a huge weight. What a
weight to hold.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor guy. Poor everyone. Tell your loved ones everything up front. Tell them you love them. I don't know that you could ever call me, Justin, and be like, I'm going to tell you about this thing that I got to talk about, but I got to do it later. And I'd be like, no chance. There's no chance.
I feel like I'm usually good about that right now. I'm always like, here's what it is now. Even if it's in a text, I'm sitting like a massive page. Like, this is what's about to happen in life.
It's just the whole concept of, I first of all, I can't, like, I buy my husband gifts and I'm like, I bought you a gift. Do you want it right now? I can't wait. Like, I don't have that ability to hold off on stuff.
My girlfriend's the same exact way. She's like, I bought this for your birthday. I'm like, my birthday is 10 months away. She's like, yeah, but do you want it now? I'm like, what? No.
People always gets mad Christmas. I'm like, Christmas is in a week. Do you want your gift now? Do you want it right now? He's like, you just want yours. I'm like, no, I'm just excited about gift giving. Like, I'm so excited for you to have this thing that I thought of so hard.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel you, Peyton. I feel you. All right. Let me get a sip of water here.
Yeah.
Can you hear Oscar snoring his face off?
A little bit. It goes in and out, so it's not too bad. I just heard him go a little in response to that. Yeah. He's like, I'm not snoring. You're snoring. Like,
I'm not snoring. You're snoring. He just sat up. He knows we're talking about him. Okay. Jeez. Okay. So take it away, my friend.
So for those listening today, I need to take this off with, I'm an 80s baby. If you're from the 80s, if you were born in the 80s, you know what that means. We have a lot of things that we followed. Wrestling was one of those.
Oh, yeah. I used to go meet the wrestlers in the mall when they came to visit, when that was a thing. Remember? Did you do that?
I never got to do that. I always wanted to do that. There was quite a few people I wanted to do that with. I'm like, oh, I want to see Bret Hart, or I want to go do this. But it's like, by the time we get to the mall, that line's already way out the door.
Dude, are you ready? Are you ready for my list?
Oh, who have you met?
Triple H, Mankind, Hardy Boys, China. Trying to think. I love the Hardy Boys. That's like right up my alley.
I mean, the Hardy Boys are my favorite tag team duo of all time. I know some people might disagree with that. I don't care. They were great. But that's the thing. The 80s wrestling was phenomenal back when WWE was still WWF. And then even the 90s, we hit the Attitude Era. There's so many great WWF superstars. You know, you got Stone Cold Steve Austin back then. You had The Rock. You had Mankind, who also was like 5 other characters.
My husband still can't hold 2 beers without smashing them together and singing.
Oh, hell yeah. We had all of these like polarizing popular characters, even the heels. You know, the villains were always cool too.
You had The Undertaker, you had Kane. They never talked. Like, they were just characters. Talk about like mask acting to the nth degree.
Exactly. You just had all of these people. And whenever anyone talks about WWE, whether it's 80s or 90s, all of those names come up. But the thing about it is, unfortunately, there is one name, and I always get kind of sad, emotional talking about it because it just really hits me in the feels. He was one of my favorite wrestlers. There's one person when it comes to wrestling, as of now, we don't talk about it. It's the unmentionable because of the tragic circumstances around this person. But I got to say his name today because I need to talk to y'all about the story and what went down. It is Chris Benoit. When I think of 90s wrestling, when I think of early 2000s wrestling, Chris Benoit's name is there for me. He's there just with Chris Jericho, everybody else that you would mention.
Chris Jericho was my man.
I'm sure he was. Y2J, right? Yeah.
Y2J, yeah, man. And the thing about Chris Benoit too is he didn't have a gimmick. You know, he was just pure. He wore, you know, it wasn't like in a crazy costume.
The man came out in his, you know, pants, and he came to wrestle, and he didn't have a shtick. He didn't have crazy storylines.
Didn't he not wear pants? Didn't he wear like little man undies?
He would wear man undies from time to time too. We're gonna get into that. I mean, he had a very long spanning career before he even hit WWE, but it's just the name that, and I understand the circumstances, you know, they don't mention.
It's an important story to tell.
It's an important story to tell. So for today, we are going to mention his name. We're going to talk about the story, and we're going to just discuss how we feel about it, what could have led to it, things of that nature. And for those of you who already know the story, definitely share within the comments of our social media how you felt about this podcast and give us some memories of what you thought about Chris Benoit as well.
And if you have any funny wrestling memories, I'd also love to hear those. I'll share some of mine.
Yes, definitely give us some funny stories too.
Me and like 8 girls were like 13 buying pay-per-view at each other's houses to watch wrestling. It's ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
We were all in it. We were in it. Okay. In the day of the Rock when you could smell what's cooking.
Yes.
I'm excited to hear the story because I don't know all the details. I just sort of know what happened.
Okay. So yeah, today we'll be talking about the infamous double murder suicide of former WWE wrestler Chris Benoit and his entire family, along with how that impacted his legacy, as we were just talking about with the WWE organization as a whole. Before that disturbing incident had occurred, though, again, Chris Benoit was widely regarded by many as one of the greatest technical wrestlers of his generation. I mean, during the span of his career, he's had the opportunity to compete in multiple different professional wrestling promotions around the world, including ECW. For those of you that remember that, WCW, and again, WWF before it was WWE. He even spent some time wrestling within Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling back in the day. His professional wrestling career lasted over 22 years, and he was able to win numerous wrestling titles during his time, including World Heavyweight Champion, US Champion, Intercontinental Champion, World Tag Team Champion. And I mean, he even won the WWE Royal Rumble in 2004, which I will never forget that. Okay. I was in high school at one of my best friend's house for that pay-per-view. There was like 20 of us. And when that man won, I was like, yeah, we were all just like, yes.
Who was he tag teamed with? Do you remember?
Oh, back in the day. Hold on. I do have, because he switched quite a bit. I was about to give you some ECW stats, but hold on. Chris Benoit's. I want to tell you at one point he was with Jericho, at least within WWF. But let's see. Oh, yes. Okay. So back in ECW, WCW, and WWF, his tag team partner was Dean Malenko. And then at one point it was Kurt Angle.
Oh, Kurt Angle. Oh yes. My God, you're blowing my mind.
Kurt Angle's another one of those people, Olympian. Man. I mean, he was the 90s and 20s. Yes.
With his 5 gold medals.
Yes.
Oh man, I wonder what happened to him.
Oh, I mean, he was still around for some time. I remember he had a neck injury. He had to get it fused, kind of like what Stone Cold did.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, Chris Benoit, again, like I said, WWE Royal Rumble in 2004, which set him up for his eventual World Heavyweight Championship triple threat match against Shawn Michaels and Triple H at WrestleMania 20, which was another sight to see.
Crazy.
Now let's take a closer look at the story behind Chris Benoit and the double murder suicide of himself and his family. Chris Benoit was born in Montreal, Quebec on May 21st, 1967, but grew up most of his young life in Edmonton, Alberta, which is where he billed as his hometown for most of his wrestling career. Growing up, he idolized star wrestlers such as Bret the Hitman Hart and the Dynamite Kid because he had attended a local wrestling event where he believed that they clearly stood out over the other wrestlers at the event. So he was so inspired to take up wrestling because of these two wrestlers that he even trained to become a wrestler at the Hart Family Gym School called The Dungeon.
Oh, that's cool.
Where many notable professional wrestlers had trained there. And back then, he had even went by Dynamite Chris Benoit when he first started his wrestling career back at the Stampede Wrestling, which was established by Stu Hart, Owen Hart's dad. From there, he went on to wrestle in Japan under the wrestling alias the Pegasus Kid, and he trained there for a year at the New Japan Dojo with other up-and-coming wrestlers during that era. After his first stint in Japan, he made his initial debut in mainstream professional wrestling in North America when he joined WCW and then ECW in the 90s. Like, this guy,
he's touched everything.
When I tell you, yeah, he literally touched everything. Back in the 90s wrestling, he was there at every capacity, at every branch. Chris Benoit was there.
Pegasus is a bold choice for a name.
It was strong. The Pegasus Kid. It's I think of like Heartbreak Kid, all these other titles, but the Pegasus Kid. I'm either expecting some Greek god to enter the wrestling ring, or maybe someone really fast. I think of like Pegasus Boots from Zelda.
Yeah.
But
the wings.
Yeah. So that was a bold choice for sure. But that was all the 90s again. But while still going back to Japan periodically to compete in NJPW, he first rose to true wrestling fame, if you will, when he returned to WCW a second time back in 1995. And he was approached by another legendary wrestler that we all loved, Ric Flair. Ric Flair invited him to become part of his stable, the Four Horsemen, along with Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson. This is all taking me back. I'm saying names right now, and I'm just flashbacking to promos and moments. I'm sure Lisa is too. I see her just looking
Ric
back.
Flair is like iconic. Woo! Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy. So he joined the Four Horsemen.
What a dope name. The Four Horsemen.
Due to the falling out with WCW and his management team there, he ended up leaving WCW to join WWE, well, WWF back then in the 2000s, where he was able to find true international success during his tenure there. Most notably, he was able to win the World Heavyweight Championship in 2004 after winning the Royal Rumble earlier that year to earn the title shot against the reigning, at the time, Triple H and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 20. That would be, unfortunately, the last major wrestling title he ever won before the incident occurred.
Was he a shorter guy in stature?
I feel like his true height was maybe like 5'8".
Yeah, so that's shorter. I mean, Triple H, when I met Triple H, I was like, this man is a Goliath. He's just enormous.
Well, he's tall and he's just so muscular.
Yeah.
He was like pound for pound. He's built like a house.
Right. Yeah. So I always thought that Chris Benoit was maybe a shorter dude, which I can respect, being a shorter person.
I thought he was a shorter, and he was proportioned. He didn't seem overly muscular.
His traps didn't touch his ears necessarily.
Yeah. No, he just seems like an all-around normal dude wrestling and kicking ass.
Yeah. Yep.
During the time leading up to the incident, Chris Benoit was in the process of transitioning over from WWE to ECW, which they were trying to resurrect at the time. Because I don't know if you guys remember that briefly when ECW was going down, it came back briefly, and you had like the Ninja. You had all these cool people coming in. It wasn't like WCW though. When that resurged, you had Hulk Hogan and it's got, you had all these people.
I was going to say, I remember one of them coming back and it was like the resurgence of the old wrestlers that you haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, no, WCW's resurgence was a true resurgence. ECW, it had some moments.
Okay, fair enough.
They were trying to resurrect that at the time. He was drafted from SmackDown to ECW back in June 2007.
SmackDown was on Thursdays, right? And
yes,
Raw was on
Mondays. And then sometimes you had SmackDown versus Raw related events and like a game. It was But his management team had already set up a storyline where Chris Benoit would earn the title shot to compete for the ECW World Championship, and he was slated to defeat CM Punk for the championship back then. According to Stephanie McMahon, Vince's daughter,
we all know who she is.
We all know who she is. She needs no introduction. At the time, she was the WWE executive. She stated that that's what the script was going to be for June 2007, blah, blah, blah. He ended up wrestling in the match for the title shot against Elijah Burke and won, which was also his last ever professional wrestling appearance. After that victory, he was originally scheduled to compete for ECW World Championship on June 24th, 2007 at the Vengeance Night of Champions pay-per-view event for a shot at the title.
They always had the dopest names for the pay-per-view events.
They did, man. Real talk now, I'm not going to lie, and I'm sure other people do it too, other diehard wrestling fans. A couple times a year, I will just go on YouTube and I will look back at old promos leading up to specific pay-per-views, because not only did they have the dopest titles, they always had just like the dopest promos. Like it would get me amped. I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to see this. It could be like 6 months
match,
away.
A cage match. Yeah. A table match. They just started picking random objects to make.
This is going to be a rivalry like no other. You're going down. We're coming for you. Yeah.
My favorite, dude, was when one wrestler in the rivalry would go out in the ring and like call the other one out from the back wings.
Yes.
So it's so theatrical. It's amazing.
It's so theatrical. It's just like one giant soap opera.
Pyrotechnics. And it's so funny. It really is a soap opera, but it's like a soap opera on steroids. It's just a bunch of grown pissy men. I wish that the women had better storylines. I don't know if that changed after I stopped watching it, but as a young woman sitting on a couch next to like 8 other young girls, the girls were always like meat to look at. You had China.
Yeah, back then they didn't have real stories. No. I hear now they do.
China was like Xena warrior princess.
She was more masculine for sure.
And they gave her actual storylines because of that. But then everyone else was just like the girl match, and they would like slap each other around and pull hair.
Trish Stratus.
Yeah, and it was always like fake boobs and skinny, tiny outfits. And it just, I wish that they gave them a little more. I'm sure with those twins, what are the twins? The Bella twins?
The Bella twins, yeah. Between them and there's a few other people now that they have better storylines, but
thank God,
it's still not near where it needs to be. Because nowadays I don't really watch wrestling as much. I go back for WrestleMania. We're still not where we need to be with female wrestlers, but we need to hurry up and get there.
Yeah.
Hands down. Also, I didn't list, I know at the beginning of this, I didn't list any of my sources, but once you guys check out our podcast, you can click on the details. You're going to see a list of all of my sources there because it's quite a few.
Cool.
Ultimately, he was supposed to show up on June 24th to do that pay-per-view, the Night of Champions, and he never showed up. And he never even showed up to the regular house event where they, go over everything, test everything, because he claimed that his wife and son were vomiting blood as a result of food poisoning.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing.
A very specific thing to say, too.
Yeah, he didn't show up because of that. That's what he claimed, which led to Johnny Nitro taking his place and eventually claiming the title during that pay-per-view. All right. So on the day of the actual pay-per-view event, again, this is June 25th, 2007. We're taking a trip down memory lane. The viewers were informed that Chris Benoit was tending to a family emergency and was unable to compete in the title match. Throughout that match itself, the crowd was chanting his name, unaware of the events that had transpired behind the scenes.
Oh, God.
On June 25th, the WWE requested a welfare check on the star wrestler because he had missed those previous events over the weekend and they had not heard back from him. When the local police got to the family home in Fayetteville, Georgia, they were shocked to find both his wife and son were dead at the house with Bibles laying next to their bodies, along with Benoit's body hanging from a lat pull-down machine from his neck.
Oh,
We're going to get into all of that now.
Jesus.
In the days leading up to that, his murder-suicide, Benoit had been cited to have been drinking excessively, which he often did whenever he was having domestic issues at home, according to his close friends. So this was evident by the numerous beer cans and bottles of wine they found at the crime scene. According to the forensics expert, the murder-suicide happened over the course of 3 days, spanning from June 22nd to June 24th, starting with his wife, Nancy. So on the night of June 22nd, as they're stating with the forensic experts, they determined that Chris had bound his wife's limbs and wrapped a towel around her head before strangling her to death, supposedly out of rage. Like he put his knee into her back and strangled her with a cord, which they presumed to be part of the lat machine.
Oh my God, that makes me nauseous. Jesus.
It gets even crazier. In her system, when they did autopsy and things of that nature, they found Xanax as well as a few other type of sedatives.
Hopefully she wasn't conscious.
They believe that she was already unconscious at the time that he decided to do these things to her. So that was June 22nd that they determined the wife had died within that span.
So does that correlate with the original event that he called out for?
The original event was June 24th. So
so this was already happening. His wife had already been murdered.
Before the event even happened, and it gets even more messed up. They determined she died on the 22nd. The day after, the 23rd, forensics determined that Chris Benoit had drugged his son, Daniel, with a Xanax in order to sedate him to the point of unconsciousness. He then proceeded to smother him to death in his bedroom, which they think using a pillow. There was no signs of bruising or anything like that.
How old was Daniel? Oh, God. When parents murder their children, it is so unimaginable to me. You have to be really, really fucked up.
Exactly, to pull something like that.
Oh.
He was 7 at the time of his death.
7. Oh, my God. 7. Okay.
So,
this is a hard one, Justin.
No, I know, but I just got to tell the story because he seemed like an average person, an average wrestler, and for all of this to be going down, we were just like, what? Like, what? And here's the catch with his son's death. Later on, it was speculated by Chris Jericho, actually, and a few other of Benoit's friends, that the son, Daniel, was suffering from Fragile X syndrome, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically, it creates mental impairments and it slows down developmental features of the brain, which means his son could have been, for some people that get it, they end up learning to talk later. It adjusts your physical attributes too. Like you might have seen some people with it where it's kind of like the forehead bows in, the eyebrows. I can't describe it. It's like a caveman feature with the overextended ears. It was speculated before by Chris Jericho and some of Benoit's other friends that Daniel, the son, might have suffered from that. And that allegedly was one of the main causes of the domestic issues between Benoit and his wife. However, forensics and the autopsy found no evidence of the son suffering from Fragile X. Also, they went on to investigate with the teachers, things like that, to see if young Daniel was learning behind or anything like that. They said no, he was on par with the rest of the kids.
I wonder where they got that from.
Chris Jericho and a few others had claims that they could see the physical aspect of the Fragile X, but they also stated that Chris Benoit never told them that directly because they're like, he was a very personal person. If he didn't want people to know, they wouldn't know. Later on, Chris Jericho went on the record to state that at the time he could have just been reaching for a rationalization as to why his friend killed himself and his family.
Right. Obviously, you're not going to befriend a person who you think would do something like this.
Exactly.
So much you don't know.
And then both Nancy and Daniel's bodies were already showing signs of decomposition by the time the authorities found them, since they had been dead for a day or two. Before he decided to end his own life, though, this is the thing. Chris Benoit made several phone calls to several different people, including his close friends. Chavo Guerrero, nephew of Eddie Guerrero, who was another close friend of his that had passed away recently at the time. These were all very well-known wrestlers.
Yep. That was a weird year for death of wrestlers. And I'm sure that there's some physical attributes that have to go into this somewhere.
Correct. So Chris made one of the phone calls to Chavo Guerrero, who he left a voicemail for on June 23rd. Mind you, at this time, the wife is already dead. He probably just killed his son. He left a voicemail for him on June 23rd stating that Nancy and Daniel were dealing with food poisoning, so he would be late for the house show the night before the pay-per-view event. Because the house show is supposed to be on the 23rd, the pay-per-view event is supposed to be on the 24th. Chavo then proceeded to give him a call back to make sure he was all right and noticed that he sounded quite off, as he stated when he spoke to Chris Benoit. After speaking on the phone for some time, Chris told Chavo that he was dealing with a lot of issues with his family and ended the call by telling him that he loved him. This was likely the last known conversation anyone had ever had with Benoit before his death. The very next day, authorities found Chris Benoit's body hanging from a pulley cord connected to one of their lat pull-down machines. So what he did to actually pull that off had released the bar, tied down some of the weights to the other end in order to hang himself.
Oh, my God.
So once the police discovered that and they were searching through his belongings, they found some of his last internet searches and found that he was looking up quickest way to break a neck. They also found a handwritten note from Chris himself stating that he was ready to leave this earth. And here's the crazy part about the note that they found. They did not find that note right away. Next to each body, he placed Bibles, as I told you.
Mm-hmm.
What ultimately happened is, I guess they didn't physically check every single Bible. They gave all of the belongings to his first wife, because this is his second wife that he's with now, but he had a previous wife, and I guess you could say he still had 2 kids living from the previous wife. They sent all of the belongings to her.
Including the Bibles that...
I know. It's so weird. It's so weird. They were just thinking it's Bible. So when I guess she was going through all of that, the note happened to come out.
That's some real spiffy police work. How'd you miss going through the Bibles that were left next to the bodies of the people he murdered?
Yeah, it was just, because there's 3 Bibles, I guess, depending on where he put the note, we don't know if it was in the cover. It could have been like really wedged in the middle somewhere. I don't know how tiny this was, but looking back at all of that within the incident, there was a variety of different motives that could have played a role in his decision to end his own life and his family's life. A lot of people had believed that Chris had suffered extensive brain damage and CTE, which is, that concussion issue during his wrestling career, especially because many people back then always stated Chris Benoit was literally like the only wrestler that actually would take a chair to the head. Like, he always would take the chair shot to the head. That's something he chose to do.
Nuts. This is the same brain deterioration that was like Aaron Hernandez, and you're seeing in a lot of football players.
Correct.
So all these like heavy contact sports are having lasting impressions on their bodies and their brains.
Exactly. Well, here's where it gets wild too, because ultimately, once he died, former wrestler Christopher Nowinski stated that, again, Benoit might have suffered from untreated concussions because he always took the chairs to the head, blah, blah, blah. Well, the catch is tests were conducted on Benoit's brain by Julian Bales, the head of neurosurgery at West Virginia University, after his death. And the results showed that Benoit's brain was so severely damaged, it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient.
Oh, man. Wow.
Tests conducted on Benoit's brain tissue revealed he did, in fact, suffer from severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is CTE, as you all know. And he had brain damage in all 4 lobes of his brain and brain stem. Bales and his colleagues also concluded that repeated concussions can lead to dementia, which can contribute to several behavior problems. Benoit's father suggested that brain damage may have been the leading cause of the double murder-suicide. A statement released by WWE dismissed this idea as speculative, though.
Mm-hmm. I know that in the NFL, they're trying to find ways to help them have less concussions with headgear and different things. There's none of that in wrestling, right? But why aren't we taking it to the next level of having them medically cleared consistently? If you know that this is a very serious condition, it happens often in these men, why are we not having medical testing and imaging done annually, every other year, anything to see the progression of this and pulling people before it gets too bad, because you have cases like Aaron Hernandez where someone's losing their life due to this person's mental disease, essentially.
Exactly.
And Chris Benoit's the same story. We're just doing a disservice to everyone in their lives.
Exactly. And then there was a few other theories which could have contributed to it as well. Another theory stated that the steroids that he and other wrestlers around that time were taking had high doses of testosterone that affected their hormones and brain functionality. The WWE did eventually change its wellness policy around mental health and steroids as a result of Benoit's case. The last other theory that people talked about was Nancy Benoit. She had filed for divorce back in May 2003, allegedly after domestic abuse from Chris. She had withdrawn it back in August of 2003. Then in February 2008, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that Nancy may have suspected her husband of having an affair with a WWE diva, and that they may have also argued over a life insurance policy. So the AJC claimed the source was a recently released report from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office.
So 4 years prior, she tried to leave.
4 years prior.
Yeah, and that's the most dangerous time for any woman in domestic violence situation. When you try to leave is when you're most likely to be injured or killed. She stuck it out 4 more years, and I'm sure that wasn't the last time she tried to leave in that 4 years.
I'm sure. But between the concussions and potential steroid use,
Dementia, the fact that his brain was the consistency with an 85-year-old person with dementia or Alzheimer's. I recently have had an experience with a family member who has suffered from dementia, and there's something that happens that makes them much more angry. They just sort of become a little bit more unhinged. There's more anger. They're worked up easier. All of that, I'm sure anything could have just escalated and contributed to all of this based on his brain's abilities.
Exactly.
It's so sad. It's sad for him. It's sad for his family.
No, it's extremely sad for all of them. And again, I mean, his legacy was completely destroyed by that.
Well, and it's easy to vilify him, right? Because what he did is horrible, but he's also a victim of the industry.
That's the thing. You are, in essence, you do become a victim of the industry. Again, it's become such a taboo subject with people, with wrestling fans. But the fact of the matter is, like, you don't just up in one day decide to do all of this. You just don't up in one day become this person. Now that we have the forensics and autopsy evidence showing what has happened to his brain, again, like you said perfectly, he was a victim of the industry itself. That fame, that notoriety, all that stuff came at such a high cost, and it just went completely unnoticed because back then all that was cared about was the fame and the money.
You're not hearing him be a major drug addict who's out doing all these things. It's literally his sport led to his demise and caused him to do some horrible things.
Yeah. All of this went down, and then these grim events ultimately tarnished Chris Benoit's legacy as a whole.
Yeah.
The WWE, even though they never officially used the term blacklisting, I mean, they did end up blacklisting him altogether, which resulted in the removal of all the merchandise and memorabilia tied to his name. He no longer appears in any of their media content, including the future video games that they released in the years following the incident. And then to show you how deep it even goes, they found out that he passed away. Obviously, when the cops came there, they told them. This was before they looked further and realized within that next day that it was like murder-suicide. So when WWE got news of that, they canceled the 3-hour-long live Raw show that was supposed to be on June 25th. And they replaced that with a custom broadcast tribute for Chris Benoit's life and career.
I remember that. Oh, you just gave me goosebumps.
They did that. And literally the day later, detailed, because this is before social media was even a thing.
Way before.
The day later, more details were coming out about what exactly happened. And the cops think it's foul play, murder, suicide. Once that came out,
they started backpedaling hard.
Yeah, they quickly distanced themselves from Chris Benoit. I mean, with the exception of his results and listings in WWE's title history,
he essentially doesn't exist.
And that's a catch, because like the summary of his title reigns have been removed and a lot of his press releases are gone now. He's ripped from the website. There's no mention, nothing of him. His biography, his videos, all of that stuff is gone. He's gone from the games. And what's crazy is the WWE pulled that tribute episode from international markets, which airs back then. International markets would air Raw on a tape delay basis. So they wouldn't even get that till like weeks later. What happened is several channels announced the episode was being withheld for legal reasons.
Oh, so they never got anything. So it only played in America?
Yeah, they never even got the tribute.
Wow.
Some countries that received WWE programming up to like 3 weeks late had all of the Chris Benoit matches edited out.
They just swiped him from reality.
Yeah, they swept him from everything. Archive footage, records, video games, memorabilia. This man is gone. And you never hear his name mentioned. And whenever there is an interview with other wrestlers and his name becomes mentioned, some will talk about it. Some will choose not to. I think John Cena said it best recently when he was asked about it. He's like, it's such a dark, tragic period that he feels WWE and just as a whole, most people are still in shock and have not come to terms with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's very hard to talk about the records or like the legend of this person because of that. And I get that. I totally get that. But it's just a lose-lose situation all in all. My heart grieves for his family, his wife, his child. My heart grieves even for him because, again, he was dealing with a lot of stuff and that went unnoticed back then. But now there's wellness checks for WWE.
Right. That's good. It's really good.
Yeah, so that's my thing. I mean, no matter how things may seem on the surface, you never really know what people are going through behind the closed doors. While things may seem like they're going well for them, there may be some demons that they're fighting through or their own that we may be completely unaware of, you know? Those dark thoughts can often lead to horrific actions that can never be taken back, and no one is immune to those kind of mental struggles, not even entertainers. So although those incidents may be hard to comprehend, we must always be willing to understand all sides of the story, no matter good or bad, to truly grasp the full picture of these events that have transpired. Oh, yeah, that's the unmentionable Chris Benoit.
Oh, man, that's a heavy one.
Yeah.
It is an important story to tell about mental health. I feel like if we can not vilify him in some way because you're looking at something that may have been out of his control and should have been monitored, I think that that's important too. He was a whole person. This one moment ended up defining his entire life, but he was a whole person before that.
Exactly. And be clear, just so we're clear, we're not diminishing anything that he did that tragic night. We're not diminishing that by any means.
Of course.
We're simply stating that he himself is a victim of everything that was happening. And every now and again, we touch on the subject of wrestlers and whether it's steroids, concussions, things like that. But like nothing's ever really done about that. We just talk about it and pretend it didn't happen.
I mean, still to this day, you have NFL players who are retiring and they're showing signs of dementia in their 40s because their brains are so beat up. And they're still, I mean, they're trying to take steps, but it's not enough. There's got to be a way.
Exactly. When you look back at the history of the creative arts, it takes a lot of darkness to create the light the arts bring to the world.
Thanks for joining us this week. And if you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and go over to Apple Podcasts to rate and review.
Please check out our sources listed in the episode notes. They're amazing.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Crime of the Arts Podcast.
We're looking forward to having you back next week. Until next time, peace out, everybody.
Peace out, everybody.